Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
It's official. Canada is under economic attack by our closest ally. President Donald Trump has followed through on his threats. Politicians are reacting. The government is retaliating. And economists are warning what will happen if this trade war continues. I'm David Smith. Today on The Big Story, Canada is now in a trade war with the United States. President Trump's actions have upended 30 years of consensus on free trade between Canada and the U.S. Make no mistake, this is an historic moment for our two countries. Here's what we know and what we don't know about Trump's tariffs. On Saturday, it became official. President Trump signed an executive order to establish tariffs on all goods imported into America from Canada. A 25% surcharge on all goods, except oil and gas, which will be tariffed at 10%, not 25%. The tariffs take effect at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, February the 4th. Trump is able to do this because of something called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. If the president declares a state of economic emergency, that piece of legislation allows them to use their executive authority to respond to that emergency, for example, by levying tariffs on foreign countries, which Trump has now done. His reason for declaring the emergency, as stated in the executive order signed on Saturday, is to do with the flow of migrants and drugs from both Canada and Mexico into the United States. Trump says illegal immigration and fentanyl constitute an economic emergency in America. That is the pretext for bringing in these tariffs. But he has yet to make any specific demands other than for Canada to stop the flow of drugs and immigrants into the U.S. The Canadian government did announce a $1.3 billion border security plan, but it apparently was not enough to convince Trump. He's also reserved the right to increase the tariffs if he so chooses. From the executive order he signed on Saturday, quote, "Should Canada retaliate against the United States in response to this action through import duties on United States exports to Canada or similar measures, the president may increase or expand in scope the duties imposed under this order to ensure the efficacy of this action," end quote. So 25% tariffs for now, possibly to be increased. We'll have to wait and see. The Canadian government has disputed whether or not the volume of drugs and migrants moving from Canada into the U.S. constitutes a legitimate emergency. Far more migrants and far more drugs flow from Mexico into the United States than flow from Canada into the United States. Nonetheless, Trump has levied tariffs on Canada anyway. The government of Canada is responding to Trump's tariffs with force. Prime Minister Trudeau announced over the weekend Canada will respond with 25% tariffs of our own on American goods imported into Canada. In a televised address to Canadians on Saturday evening, Prime Minister Trudeau laid out his government's plan to respond to Trump's trade war.
The actions taken today by the White House split us apart instead of bringing us together. Tonight, I am announcing Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods. This will include immediate tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods as of Tuesday, followed by further tariffs on $125 billion worth of American products in 21 days' time to allow Canadian companies and supply chains to seek to find alternatives. Our response is de plus. Like the American tariffs, our response will also be far-reaching and include everyday items such as American beer, wine, and bourbon, fruits and fruit juices, including orange juice, along with vegetables, perfume, clothing, and shoes. It'll include major consumer products like household appliances, furniture, and sports equipment. and materials like lumber and plastics, along with much, much more.
The list of goods the government has hit with counter tariffs is extensive. All kinds of foods, materials, consumer goods, from chicken to lumber to jewelry. $30 billion worth of American imports to Canada will be hit with the 25% tariff starting on Tuesday. But Trudeau also called on Canadians to consider not buying American products at all or spending money in America while this trade war continues.
And now is also the time to choose Canada. There are many ways for you to do your part. It might mean checking the labels at the supermarket and picking Canadian-made products. It might mean opting for Canadian rye over Kentucky bourbon, or foregoing Florida orange juice altogether. It might mean changing your summer vacation plans to stay here in Canada and explore the many national and provincial parks, historical sites, and tourist destinations our great country has to offer. C'est le temps de choisir des produits d'ici et d'appuyer des entreprises d'ici. D'appuyer nos producteurs agricoles, nos manufacturiers, nos travailleurs, nos entrepreneurs, nos artistes. It might mean doing all of these things or finding your own way to stand up for Canada.
Meanwhile, President Trump continues to ramp up his rhetoric against Canada. Trump has been making inflammatory claims about Canada's trade relationship with the U.S. over the past number of weeks. Not only about issues of border security and illegal drugs, but also more traditional trade irritants like protected industries or supply management. Trump, speaking with reporters on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews on Sunday, had this to say.
Well, Canada's been very abusive of the United States for many years. They don't allow our banks. Did you know that? Canada does not allow banks to go in. If you think about it, that's pretty amazing. If we have a U.S. bank, they don't allow them to go in. Canada's been very tough on oil or on energy. They don't allow our farm products in, essentially. They don't allow a lot of things in, and we allow everything to come in. It's been a one-way street. We subsidize Canada by the tune of about $200 billion a year. And for what? What do we get out of it? We don't get anything out of it. I love the people of Canada. I disagree with the leadership of Canada. And something's going to happen there. But if they want to play the game, I don't mind. We can play the game all they want.
And he followed up those comments with a social media post Monday morning, writing, quote, Canada doesn't even allow U.S. banks to open or do business there. What's that all about? End quote. Trump posted that right after speaking with Trudeau Monday morning. The two spoke over the phone, and they will speak again Monday afternoon. These comments might be an early indication of some of the concessions that Trump may want from Canada if we want to end the tariffs. On that front, we are still speculating. Trump has not said specifically what he wants from Canada. Meanwhile, opposition politicians in Canada are reacting to the tariff news as well. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says Canada should cut off exports of critical minerals to the U.S., and he wants to see the government pass new spending to create support programs for workers who may lose their jobs as the result of the trade war.
We do not want a trade war, but Donald Trump is bringing one. And I know workers are worried that you might lose your job. Families are worried that the price of food, which is already so high, is going to go up even higher. Workers should not pay the price for this trade war, and they don't have to. We can put in place financial supports that directly help those impacted. We can make sure that Canadian contracts go to Canadian workers, and we can fight back with retaliatory tariffs. And we can shut off the flow of critical minerals, hitting Elon Musk where it counts. For New Democrats, our priority is clear. We will always fight for workers. We will always fight for Canadian jobs and Canadian families. With New Democrats, it's workers first, always.
That was a video message that Singh posted online on Sunday. Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre as well held a news conference on Sunday. He countered Trump's narrative about Canada taking advantage of the U.S. with free trade.
There is no justification whatsoever for these tariffs or this treatment. Canada will never be the 51st state. We are an independent, proud, and strong nation. I like to speak first to our American friends. You are our friends. You are our neighbors. We share the longest undefended border in the history of the world. You buy our products, and we buy yours. You have a trade surplus with us when energy is excluded. And when it is included, the deal is even better for you because you buy our oil and our gas at massive price discounts.
Poilievre called on the government to use any of the revenue it collects from the counter tariffs to fund tax cuts for Canadians rather than spending on new programs. And he also called on the government to work to find new markets, new trading partners for Canadian goods to diversify our trade away from reliance on the United States.
That includes LNG plants, pipelines, mines, factories, port expansions, so that we can get our products to overseas markets without going through and profiting the United States. It was insane for us to block our industries before this crisis. It is a fatal mistake now. No longer can we tolerate special interests, politicians, and worst of all, corporate lobbyists who profit by shutting down industries, blocking resources in Canada while profiting off them in Brazil, the Middle East, China, and elsewhere. We must bring home production and self-reliance to our country.
One Canadian province is already retaliating against the U.S. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who's in the midst of a snap election campaign, announced Monday that the province would be barring U.S. companies from bidding on any provincial government contracts. And Ontario also canceled a $100 million deal with Elon Musk's SpaceX. The province had contracted Musk's company to provide Starlink satellite internet to rural communities back in November. That deal has now been scrapped. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has been a central character in the tariff story. She has been advocating strongly for working to reach a deal with the U.S. to avoid tariffs. She was the only premier to meet with Trump at Mar-a-Lago last month as she lobbied for an exemption for oil and gas tariffs. And she also refused to sign on to a joint statement with the rest of Canada's premiers because she is opposed to even considering export tariffs on Canada's oil and gas, which would predominantly impact Alberta's economy. She is reacting to the Trump news as well. In a statement on social media, Premier Smith says she's disappointed with the Trump tariff decision and says that Alberta will, quote, work collaboratively with our federal government and fellow provinces on a proportionate response to the imposed U.S. tariffs, but also, quote, continue to strenuously oppose any effort to ban exports to the United States or to tax our own people and businesses on goods leaving Canada for the United States, end quote. So Danielle Smith still digging in her heels on the idea of banning exports of oil and gas to America entirely. As for the big question on everyone's minds, what does this mean for Canada's economy and for us as Canadian consumers? The news on that front is not good. Based on preliminary economic analysis, if these tariffs are here to stay, Canada will see a recession this year. The Bank of Montreal published an analysis on Monday based on a scenario where the 25% U.S. tariffs are in place for a full year. And BMO says Canada's economy would contract by 2%, meaning zero GDP growth in 2025, a nationwide recession. That would drive up the unemployment rate to 8%. And under that scenario, the bank predicts the Canadian dollar could fall as low as 64 or 65 cents U.S. At the time of recording today's show, the loonie is trading at 68.5 cents US. That's a full cent lower than on Friday, just before the tariff announcement. A weaker Canadian dollar means everything we import from the US will cost that much more even before Canada's own tariffs are applied. All of this, of course, depends on how long the US tariffs stay in place. And on that front, we have no clear answer at this point. We don't know what Donald Trump's plan is. Only he knows exactly how long this will continue. And that is the big story today. As always, we love hearing your feedback on this episode or any other episode. Email us, hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca, or you can leave us a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or any other podcast platform. Please rate, review, follow, and share. I'm David Smith. Until next time, thank you for listening.